How do, folks? Welcome into the next edition of Try Not to Cut Yourself While You're Wood Carving. Actually, we're going to be doing another video, a how-to video for the Wayne County Homemakers Group Happy Chippers, which is sponsored and oversaw by Mr. Seth Hart here at the Extension Office, Wayne County Extension Office. And this time we're going to be talking about what we call a comfort bird. If you remember, we did a bunch of comfort crosses or hand crosses, whatever you'd like to call them, that fits in your hand. We've already done those. But this time what we're going to do is a comfort bird, which is a stylized bird. Looks like a bird shape, but there's no details whatsoever in that. And when we first started about doing this, one of our members, Tara Burton, came up with a pattern. And this one was made from the pattern that Tara brought us, and she had already made a couple of these. And I appreciate her bringing that pattern to us and bringing us this idea. But when I made it and got the feeling of it, I thought, you know, my hands are pretty large, and somebody with smaller hands, it might not fit hardly as well. So I made a second one and made it a little bit smaller. I narrowed it up about a ½ inch, not hardly as wide, and the length and everything was still the same. That made it a little bit better, but it was still felt a little bit bigger. So I went extreme, and I shortened it about 1.5 inches, and I cut it down way narrow. This is a 1x1 block, about 3.5 to 4 inches long. And when I did this one, and if you'll notice, there's no detail on it whatsoever. You can tell it's a bird. It's got the beak and everything, but it fits so much better, and it will fit any size hands, large hands, small hands, whatever. It's going to fit in there real good. So I went down, and this is going to be our design for the small bird. If somebody still wants to do the larger one, that's fine. But I chose the smaller one in that for this demonstration. And what we start out with, now, I've already got the profile cut out, the upper and lower profile cut out for the birds that we're going to be doing with this. But now, before you get started, you might as well get everything ready. Have your glove ready, have your thumb protection ready, and get your knife ready. Now, I'm going to be using a knife today that's called a slowing knife, but any knife you've got will work. This slowing knife has a little bit longer blade, and it's a little bit easier to rough out with, which is what we're going to do first off when we start with this bird, is rough it out. Before you ever start cutting, strop your knife. Always strop your knife. Make sure your knife is sharp, and then strop it. Once you get your knife sharpened initially, there is never any need to sharpen it again unless you damage that blade. Now, this blade's not been damaged, so all you've got to do to keep the edge on it is to strop it. And before you start carving anytime, it's a good idea when you take your blade out to strop it to get it ready to carve. And I've got two different kinds of leather here. I've got the rough side and the smooth side, and I've got compound on both of those. And I've already stropped it on the rough side, so now I'm going to smooth it down on the smooth side of the leather. But strop your knife. Make sure you leave your bevel flat as you're stropping. And for this first section, we've got our knife stropped, and we've got it ready. I'm going to wipe the compound off of that blade, because if I don't, if that compound gets into the wood, and then you try to carve the wood, what's going to happen is it's going to dull your blade up. So you want to make sure you get the compound off the blade before you start. And make sure you've got your carving glove on, because if you don't, you're going to cut yourself. I'll just about guarantee it that you'll cut yourself if you don't have your carving glove on. And then, of course, your thumb protector as well. And today I'm using actually, that's just a thumb I cut out of out of an old leather glove. It works. You know, whatever works like that's fine. And in your kit, you've got the safety tape that you can wind around. It's just this thumb's a little bit easier to pull off and on. And this is the design that we've come up with that we're going to be using. And this design exactly matches the blanks that I've got sewn out in profile. Same size. Because after I decided on what the design I like best, that's when I drew up the design to put on to pass out to y'all. First thing you've got to do is make your marks. Lay out your bird on your wood. So we're going to take a break right here, and then we'll come back and start laying this bird out so you can see what we're going to do. Okay, the bird that we're going to be carving, like I say, this is the profile that we're going to be using. I've already got it cut out, the bottom and top profile of the blank. This is called a cutout. Whenever you're ready to carve on something, when you've got the shape basically cut out, it's called a cutout. When you take a cutout, first thing you've got to do is, do we need to adjust a little bit, Seth, or roll on?
Keep going, it's good.
Okay, first thing you need to do is establish the center line of the piece you're carving. Now, it doesn't have to be exact, but try to get it pretty close. And usually what I do, I'll estimate about where the center is. And then I'll hold my finger like this to where it's placed, and I'll just run it right down that piece of wood, right like that. And I got a little bit off, so I'm going to readjust that and remember what center line I marked. There we go. Anyhow, it's pretty close. Pretty close. Get it pretty close to center, and do that top and bottom so that you've got a center line for your carving. And there's a reason for that, because this bird requires a whole lot of rounding off to that center line. Now, that's the center part of the bird. Next thing we've got to do is determine the top profile. And if you'll notice, this is the top profile. And we're going to draw that on top of this. Notice you've got a little beak here starting out. Which you'll draw in.
Just a little triangle, I guess, huh?
It's a little triangle is all it is. It's a good way to start. Then we've got to draw in our head shape, which comes back from the beak a little bit. And then it will go out to the side, for the side of the bird. Do the same way on this one. You try to keep this as symmetrical as possible while you're doing this organic shape here. And if you misdraw it a little bit, that's all right. It's a pencil. Back up and redraw it to get it the way you want it. Okay, as the body comes back around, we'll come right back here. Oh, right about right here, I feel like would be good. And then draw in the shape of the tail. This doesn't have to be exact, because while you're carving, you'll be able to adjust it a little bit as you go. And it'll work out real good. So now if you'll notice, we've got our top profile made. The side profile is already taken care of. And the next thing we've got to do is to take the knife we're going to be using and make sure your knife is already sharp and you stropped it before you started. Always strop your knife before you start carving. Always use the safety measures. You know, make sure that you're using your knife properly when you do that. And this is really pretty easy to use, because all you're doing, you're taking this off right there, and you're taking this off right there. You're going to be taking this out, and you're going to be taking this area right here out. You're just going to be eliminating those. So this is real simple. And you can do it all with one knife. Whichever knife you have is what you need to use. But you follow those lines and cut the profile, the side profile, down to where it matches what the drawing says. You do that on the top and take it all the way down the side, so that it follows all the way down the piece of the wood. Always maintaining control of your knife. Don't let it get away from you. Maintain the control of your knife, so that if it slips, make sure you don't have anything in its way that's going to cut you. That's not going to hit any part of your body that's liable to cut. Okay, if you can see right there, I've got that part of it taken care of. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to do the same thing to this side. We're going to cut down to that line. Is what we're going to do. And take it all the way down the side of the wood to that same depth. You may have to stop and look at it a little bit to make sure you're getting it down to where you want it. Like I say, you don't have to have it exact, just get it close. And try to keep it fairly symmetrical if you can, where it's the same on both sides, because it's a bird. Even though it's an organic shape, it still has certain properties, like the right side is the same as your left side, just like we are. Your right's the same as your left. Okay, that's got the head shape taken care of. Now, back here at the back where the tail cuts in, you're liable to run into some difference in the grain, which way it runs. And what I like to do in a situation like this is to make a stop cut into that grain. Right like that. And then, actually for this one, I'm going to change knives on this one and go to a smaller knife, which is my normal wood carving knife right here. And we're going to change and do this one because the handle's a little bit smaller and it's a little bit easier for me to use it. Different tools will work better in different situations. That's the way it is with this. So we're making a stop cut right here. And then we're going to carve back to that stop cut. We went in one direction. Now we're going to go the other direction until we get down to the depth we want for the tail where it comes in. Just check your work as you go. If you'll notice the way that's curling up there, that's where the grain changed. So I'm going to carve back down to it from the opposite side. Now, it's a little bit of a rough cut right there, but by the time that we get through rounding everything off, it'll be fine. There'll be no problem whatsoever, but we've got it roughly into the shape we want there for its tail, as you can see by looking down on the profile. Now we're going to do the same thing over on this side. Start out with a stop cut. We'll get right in the middle of the area right there to make it easier. Make a stop cut. Again, always stay in control of what you're doing. And we're going to go back to that stop cut from both sides, because the grain is going to change just a little bit, and it'll get a little bit, I guess you'd call it persnickety as we go. All right. Take the profile to where it goes all the way down the side of the bird. See, that's what you're wearing your thumb protector for, because if that were to slip right there, that's going to keep me from cutting my finger, making my thumb bleed. Okay, see there from the top profile where I've got the right and left sides ready to start rounding off. Now, your next step is just simple. You've got to take this entire bird and round it off to this center. Okay, if it helps you, draw a center line through this side as well. We can back up there and do that. It may not be exactly center, but it'll be close. That right there will work pretty good for what we're going to be doing. And we'll do the same thing over here. Of course, I'm not an artist like Seth, so it's difficult for me to draw a straight line, but that's fairly straight. It worked right there. But if you'll notice, we've got a very organic shape here, and it's even going to become even more organic as we start carving. But we take this, we've got to round the center line on the bottom to the center line on the side. We've got to round that around to where it becomes just like if you were looking at a fourth part of a quarter, or a fourth part of if you're looking at the fourth part of this handle here, we're rounding it off to look like that. Not exactly the same contour, but similar to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start rounding off, and here I think I'll start rounding off right here in the middle. Right here in the middle. And the easiest way to do that is to cut the sharp edge off, come up here, cut the next sharp edge off, and keep going with those edges like that until you get it right with the center line, which is right there. See, by the time you get all those sharp edges cut off, you've got it down to where it's pretty well rounded off. And I'm going to go ahead and take it off to this center line on this side. It's not completely finished when you get to that point, but it's well on its way. And if you'll notice, it goes from center line and rounds off to this other center line. Now, I'm not going to bore you by sitting here and make you watch me whittle this. We're going to take a short break, and I'll finish this off camera, and we'll come back as soon as I get it all rounded off. Okay, folks, we're back. We finally got this thing carved down, rounded off. You'll notice it rounds off to the center here, and it rounds off up to the center from that side. Same way over here, if you go from the bottom, it rounds to the center, and the top rounds to the side. Same way with the head, it rounds off. And the tail is slightly rounded. It's just kind of a concave shape. And I cut a little notch in the tail. After I got the knot getting on, I thought it looked a little bit more like a bird tail, like that. But now you're not putting any details in this. You can tell it's a bird body. You can tell there's a little beak here on the end of the bird, but that's the only, and it's got a tail. That's the only detail that's actually in place here. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention at the intro of this, I just naturally assumed that everybody watching this would know who I am. My name's Carson Payne, and I'm doing this to help the Happy Chippers with Wayne County Extension Service. That's in case anybody's watching it that's not from here in Wayne County, because it's going to be out there on YouTube and anybody can watch it. And hopefully it'll help someone maybe down the line somewhere carve a little bit. After we get to this point, you can see all the wood facets and everything. Now, normally I do not sand my wood carvings. I usually leave them with the little facets on it and just paint over it and do it like that. But because of the nature of the comfort bird, you want it smooth, because it's a very tactile sense that you're using in doing the comfort birds. You want it to feel good in the hand. You want it to feel warm and soft and smooth. So because of that, we're going to sand this. We're going to start out with either 100 or 120 grit sandpaper, whichever you've got to use. And you know, there's not a whole lot to sanding outside of you grab your sandpaper and go to it. That's about the only thing there is. The only thing you can do is put a little elbow grease into it. And you're not going to have to worry about sanding anything off, so you can just take your sandpaper and go to town on it. And make do your sanding without worrying about it. You can even do it without looking at the part. You can do this while you're watching TV if you wanted to. But you sand down all the facets first with 100 or 120 grit, whichever one you've got. And then after you do the 100 or 120 grit, you come back with, I would use 220 to give it a final little bit of a polishing on your sanding. And you should be able to see right there what a difference that makes on the tail as compared to the bottom of it. See the facets there? And look how you can smooth it down so much right there. It just takes a little bit of work. There's no way to get around it. If you want something smooth like that, about the only way you can do it is hand sanding. They don't have any machines that will do that for you. You've got to do it yourself. And again, I know you don't want to sit there and watch me sand the rest of this bird, so we're going to take a break here, get off camera and finish sanding it, and I'll be right back with that. All right, we finally got this fairly well. You can take it to the point you want it to be. You can take it finer than this, or you can even stop a little sooner than this, but you know, it needs to be smooth to where it feels good in the hand. So it's a very tactile thing is what you've got here. So we've got this sanded down now. We finished up with 220 sandpaper. And if you left this bird like it is here, holding it in your hand is the intention of it. But you know, if the oil's from your hand or your hands may have been a little dirty or something, unless you put a finish on this to protect it, it's going to get grimy and grubby looking and you'll have to sand the dirt off of it again. So to prevent that, we're going to take and use a clear finish on it. And what we're using is a butcher block conditioner. It's food grade, it's food safe, so if a child were to get a hold of it and stick the bird in its mouth, or to, you know, even if you were to give it to someone that was older and their faculties weren't exactly there and they put it in their mouth, that way it's not going to be toxic to them. And this is the same finish that we put on comfort crosses. Normally, I don't put this kind of finish on a carving. You can anytime that you're not going to paint it. But I usually paint the biggest part of my carving, so the only time I use the butcher block finish is when I'm just leaving a clear finish that needs to be food grade. Simple stuff to use. Simple stuff to use. All you do, some people take and put a little bit of this on a soft cloth and rub it on. I prefer to just pour a little bit on the bird and then rub it in with my fingers. Is what I prefer to do. You can just kind of rub it around, make sure you get it in all the cracks and crevices. Make sure you cover the surface real good. And in fact, use a little bit of extra. It won't hurt a thing because you want to make sure that what you put on there is able to soak into the wood a little bit. And this stuff has about the same consistency as probably Johnson's baby oil. Feels about the same, you know, it's a slick consistency like that. And just rub it in real good. And after you put that on, normally what you would do is let that soak in for about 20 minutes. And if you want a little bit more luster to it, you can always reapply it and let it set overnight if you wanted to. But if you let it set for about 20 minutes, that's usually sufficient to give you a pretty good finish. And I'm going to go ahead and wipe it off now so that you can see it in this video. And you can see quite a bit of it's already soaked into it. And in fact, you can take, after it dries and soaks in and you start wiping it off, you can take your cloth and even buff it like you would a piece of jewelry or a piece of silver. Or if you were wanting to make something shine, or if you're waxing your car. I don't get that vigorous when I'm waxing my, well, actually, I usually get somebody else to wax the car. if I'm waxing the car, but you can buff it like that, like you would a floor wax that you were to use. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention about the shape of this bird, that I modified it just a little bit. If you'll notice, it has a flat bottom to it. And the reason I did that is so it will set without rolling. So you can set it on something and it's easier for the folks to pick up and they don't have to go chasing it where it's rolled off to the other side. But we'll rub this off real good. get this off my hands. It doesn't hurt your hands. Like I say, it's non-toxic and it wipes off real easy. And not only that, all it is beeswax and carnauba wax all mixed in there together. And I think maybe it's got some mineral oil in it. So if anything, it may help your skin there. You may want to use that as a skin conditioner. Yeah, you probably could. But anyhow, after you get it, you can see that there's a little bit of sheen left on it. And that pretty much takes care of doing the comfort bird. Real simple. The only thing you've got to worry about, the only real carving you've got to do is when you first cut out the side profiles, and then all that's left is you just round everything off. Make it look rounded is all you've got to do. And that pretty much takes care of that. And we hope you enjoy the little project that you're going to be doing soon. Thank you.